Alex Cherin is the Senior Vice President of Englander, KNB and Allen, or NAB and Allen, I should say. He writes a weekly column on international trade and globe issues. Good to see you, Alan. Thank you for being with us.
Good to see you.
Okay, so the view from Europe seems to be that this tax plan takes the US from a high-tax country down to a low-tax country, at least from a business point of view. But it goes way beyond creating a kind of a level playing field here. It actually says it gives a huge advantage to American exporters, and that will penalize countries in Europe, especially countries like Germany.
Yeah, well, that's certainly the perception. But what we're going to see in the coming days and coming months is whether Trump is the great negotiator, as he's touted himself to be over the last few months and a year. So look, three big takeaways from today's vote in the House overseas in Europe and Asia, and this is sort of the eyes of the global community. Number one, the Trump administration and what happened with this bill has absolutely cemented the fact that lowering the corporate tax rate is going to be the cornerstone of the Trump administration. We don't know whether that's going to pan out internationally or not, but they certainly signaled that that's going to be the cornerstone for years to come. Number two is this hopeful optimism that this money that's parked overseas, American money, is going to somehow be repatriated back to the United States by giving a small tax penalty, 8 to 11%, sort of a get-out-of-jail-free card. And then the third, which you mentioned, which is the most contentious, is this incentive that this bill gives to American exports, again, to be determined.
Okay, well, finance ministers from Germany, France, Britain, Spain, and Italy, they've been in touch with the Trump administration directly. They've written a letter. This is part of it. It is important that the U.S. government's rights over domestic tax policy be exercised in a way that adheres with international obligations to which it has signed. They go on to argue about all the unfair advantages for American companies. They also say that there could be violations here in a number of treaties as well as international law. So, without getting too much into the weeds, because it's complicated stuff, but do they have a case, and what can they do?
They do. The irony, John, is this is the stuff that we complain all the time about when other countries do it, whether it's China or other countries, yet here we are, we've codified it in our legislation today. Look, what it essentially does is lower the tax rate on U.S. exports to about 13%. The hope is that that'll obviously incentivize small businesses, agriculture, other markets in the U.S. to have a broader open market overseas. The problem is that other countries, as you mentioned, are going to cry foul. To further complicate this is when it does come to a head, where do we go to resolve these disputes? Over the last few months, the Trump administration has tried to wean us off of our reliance on things like the World Trade Organization, NAFTA, the Trans-Pacific Partnership. So it's a little hypocritical for us to criticize other countries, pull away from these multinational trade agreements that we have, and then go ahead and do the same thing.
Yeah, there's a lot of faith in the Trump administration in these sort of institutional, international organizations. We're also not hearing a lot officially from China, but there's been a lot of stuff sort of in the state-run media which doesn't get there by accident. There was a front-page editorial in one of the business papers warning that tax cuts in the US and their fallout will pose a challenge to China's manufacturing and technological innovation, which China must cautiously brace for. What would that impact be? And not just, of course, in China, because China's typical of so many countries across Asia, huge manufacturing, a lot of US investment there.
Yeah, look, China's been around the block a few times before. They know how to handle this. And what they see is in the short term, there will be some benefit. You're seeing obviously this huge rally on Wall Street. They obviously advantage from that. But I think in the long term, China's got some concerns for two reasons. Number one is what I mentioned to you before, is that if there is a dispute that arises, there's really no venue that they can negotiate that in, whether it's, again, the World Trade Organization or the TPP. The second is China loves short-term tax breaks. It benefits them, again, whether it happens in the U.S. or elsewhere. But what they're most concerned about is the long-term stability of the U.S. economy. And what nobody's mentioning, what really didn't come out of this bill today, and what the international markets have yet to react to, is the $1.4 trillion that this is going to add to the U.S. deficit. That is going to send shockwaves through China.
Yeah, because the currency issue is a big issue for the U.S. And when you're on these huge deficits, you've got to get the money from somewhere. So, how does the United States end up funding this, and what, when you take $1.4 trillion out of the world economy to fund these tax cuts, what's the flow-on effect?
Well, again, I think that the biggest takeaway today overseas is that the U.S. is going to turn back to sort of those Reagan-era trickle-down policies. And again, there's this optimism that if you lower the corporate tax rate from 35 to 21%, that's going to be offset by long-term growth. Again, markets have shown, and the international community has shown that they would rather have long-term stability.
Yeah, it doesn't work, I guess, the whole trickle-down theory, despite how much people want to believe in it. Thanks for coming in. It's good to see you.
Thank you.